Hello to everybody watching, and welcome to another broadcast from LaRouche PAC TV. I'm Matthew Ogden, and we're gathered here for another discussion between Mr. LaRouche and the national candidates slate. We've got Diane Sayer here in the studio, and the others gathered over the video conference. And we're coming off of a very significant international webcast that Mr. LaRouche delivered yesterday. And I think with the decision by various leaders inside the Democratic Party to back off on Obama, it's very clear that the tempo of events is hurtling frighteningly quickly towards the outbreak of exactly what you warned about yesterday. And it's our responsibility to keep ahead of that tempo of events.
Yeah, the thing that comes up now is, by the way, I'll just say before saying that, there's a copy of this, what I had intended to use as a background script, not a full script, but a background script, keynote script, for the webcast. Unfortunately, there was a jam up in the computer system back in the base, and therefore we did not have this available at that time. But we covered the same points essentially. But the utility of this, which you can get copies of as such, utility of this particular memorandum, which I memorandum to myself, is that it does give you an indication of such a document. It does give you an indication, which I suggest is what you should have is on your list of points, which you lead off with in campaign work. To give them, well, first of all, we've got the war question. That's dynamite, because the Democratic Party in particular, the Republicans are ignoring that issue. Right. We've got more information on this, but generally what this thing will do will give you a listing of the points which we should be covering overall, which what I prepared that for that use, which will help you do that. Because the point is you shouldn't be acting like candidates in the ordinary sense. We should all be acting as, we don't have a president, we don't have a qualified prospect for president yet available to us in the United States. We have a presidential election coming up, but nobody qualified to be president. So therefore, everybody has to think and act like a president. And the restriction is, in order to have a consolidated personality, which 6 of you are, as a consolidated personality as a president. That doesn't mean you're going to be inaugurated as a president with 6 parts, but it means that you're going to speak essentially with one voice from one level. And that will mean that you are not 6 candidates, that you are a composite candidacy, which is going to do all the things that are necessary in various parts of the country, all the things that are necessary that a president should be doing in terms of campaign policy. So think that you are part of a presidency, of the personality of a presidency, and think from the top down, not the bottom up. That's the key to the whole thing we're doing, is that. And that was the point I wanted to get to. And I was happy. That's why I wanted that schedule for Monday, so seriously to coordinate this thing to do. I thought I was going to do it before, but then that got jammed up. So we're doing you after me, and I planned it the other way around. But so anyway, that gives you the point. I think that's the issue, that you must think as a composite president of the United States, like a presidency divided among 6 people. We're going to represent a presidency, are going to be a voice of a presidency that should be. And we just call it the presidency that should be. And you're not claiming to be that president, but you're claiming to be the composite representative of what that president shall be as a candidate. And so take it from there.
Well, I think this Democratic capitulation to Obama has a lot of people really beside themselves, because what we see in the field out in the organizing is that people don't like the Republican candidates with good reason. And then they say, well, okay, well, then we'll have to go with Obama, and they know that it's wrong, which makes them all the more hysterically committed to it, in a sense, which is partly why it's so urgent that we exist and do this. The other thing is, I think that does put us really squarely on this trajectory to World War III. I mean, we did a phenomenally effective international mobilization over Christmas and the New Year when it was not in the U.S. news media that we were targeting Iran and Syria and really Russia. Now it's all over the news media as a function of this capitulation of the Democratic Party. And we have insanity like what McCain just did at this Munich Security Conference, telling the Chinese that there's going to be an Arab Spring. I mean, we're threatening, in effect, to overthrow governments of China and Russia while we're moving nuclear warheads into areas contiguous in the case of Eastern Europe or the Pacific Ocean. This is definitely an extremely alarming situation that we're putting ourselves in.
Well, what the proposal amounts to, and remember, you've got two factors that are presumably the same, but they're not the same. You have the British Queen, and she is an empress. That's the way she thinks as an empress. She thinks of the empress as one in a line of descent of empire all the way back to the founding of the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire was simply taking a lot of local oligarchical imperiums in different parts of the Mediterranean and combining them into one, which was happened. So the Roman Empire was a empire, which was implicitly had been all these parts of the empire, competing parts of the empire. Now you combine this whole thing into one, and you have a British Empire. In other words, the ruler of the world. Now, Obama is a mental case, and they should have no bones about that. You know, I gave this thing back in 2009, this presentation, in April of 2009, on his mental profile. And you can just look at that piece and think about it, and look at what he's done and the pace at which he's done them since that April of 2009. So therefore, you have defined, I predefined for you, this psychotic called the president. So therefore, he is being used by the British Empire as their expendable stooge. Remember what happened to Nero. Nero became a bigger and bigger killer, more abusive, more killing, each step of the way. So has Obama. So has Obama. Obama, when he was defeated, or thought he was about to be defeated as emperor, killed himself after eating and killing his mother or something. This is Obama. Somehow, some wise guy somewhere in British intelligence had gone through a list of perverts, candidate perverts for president of the United States. And they found this guy, and it's almost a miracle to think that you can dredge back to the time of the Emperor Nero, and somebody pulls up an American who's not quite an American because his parents were not Americans. Anyway, just a little interesting side step. So they take this guy, and they put him into the presidency. Now, he's performing a function. But remember Kleenex. What do you do with a Kleenex once you've used it? You throw it away. Now you have the automatic Kleenex that throws itself away when it's used up. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an empire, so don't assume that the motivation of Obama is the motivation of the Queen. Obama is the Queen's puppet, which he can throw away or cause himself to throw away. Since they have his profile, and they have it finely defined enough that they know exactly how to pull the switch on him to have him dispose of himself. So he's significant because he's being used for a significant role. He has nothing in himself of any significance politically. So that you don't assume that the Obama profile, as Obama personally, corresponds to the Queen's profile. The Queen's profile is far different than Obama's. She is actually in a situation where she, on behalf of her history, which goes back to the Roman Empire, actually, they think of themselves as being the Roman Empire. She thinks of herself as being a descendant of the Roman emperor. And her thing is, she sees that the entire world of her empire, her imperial world, is disintegrating. Now, this has happened. The Roman Empire disintegrated. It was then replaced by the Byzantine Empire. It was then replaced by the Crusader system, which was run by the Venetians, who ran the money side of it. And then it was replaced by the British Empire. So they're thinking of themselves as a permanent Roman Empire, which has gone through these different reincarnations, but is always a continuation of the same principle. That's the mentality. So don't assume that Obama thinks and has the motives that the Queen does. The Queen's motives are long-term motives, that she is in a long succession of power. She's concerned about the fact now that her empire, the British Empire, is now reached the point of disintegration. And the big problem that they had to worry about was the United States. Because the power of the United States and the potential power of the United States is such that the empire could not pull off a stunt like this without bringing the United States in as an accomplice. So that's the situation. So don't assume that Obama is a reflection of the power that he's in. I mean, here's a guy sitting in a room between the official part and the private part of the White House, watching basketball games and other kinds of things, sports things, and telling people to go away and not annoy him when they try to bring business in there.
Or maybe videos of the drone strikes that he's ordered.
Yeah, things like
smut films.
Yeah, sure. So therefore, we have to estimate the thing from a strategic standpoint, which is not the Obama reference point. The Obama situation is a byproduct of the reference point. The reference point is the British monarchy. And the British monarchy's motives, inner motives, are not the same as Obama's. Obama is not serious enough about anything in and of itself to be considered. So what we're really up against here with this election, the election process, we don't have a candidate who's fit to serve. And I can assure you that what I've seen of the Republican candidates, none of them are fit to serve. They're independently crazier than Obama from that standpoint. So we need, what I said yesterday is relevant. What we need is to get enough Democrats and Republicans to agree that we don't want either of these bums in the presidency, either the designated, what seems to be the designated candidate for president on the Republican side or on the Democratic side. We don't have a candidate we want. Neither one is acceptable. And we don't see anything among the Republicans that would be acceptable among the candidates either. So therefore, we need an acceptable candidate for president who will replace Obama. And we would hope that the replacement for Obama will include Republicans who are patriotic and who will work with such a presidency for reason of patriotism against the British Empire as the enemy. And in that case, we have a solution. And therefore, since we don't have an available, viable presidential candidate for either Democrat or Republican nomination presently, therefore we have to have a surrogate for that candidate. And you six are the core of that surrogate.
Well, Lynn, I think on that point, the way that you had laid it out with the idea that it's 6 personalities, 6 voices, I think that's a contrast for the presidency. I think that's a contrast to Obama and the potential of 6 or more personalities or voices going on in his head at the same time. So I think it's a useful contradiction there. But I just wanted to make the point that, it's a lot of what people thought that they were getting out of Obama, particularly from the so-called left, the people who had, wanted Obama from the standpoint of the environmentalism and this policy, that really what you're now getting with this war drive is that Russia and China have not played by the British Empire's mandate, which is monetarism and environmentalism. They have not gone along with the bailout policy. They have said, that they are committed to the development, which flies in the face of this environmentalism, and this is now the reason why they're being targeted for war. So it's an irony that here you have the people who support Obama for this environmentalism, but this becomes the foundation for why they're pushing for this thermonuclear world war against Russia and China, because they're not playing along with the British mandate of environmentalism and monetarism. So it's just the more we have to just go out straight and attack this environmentalism for what it is. This is just look at it as a policy. It says there can be no development. We must keep nations backward. We must keep mankind undeveloped, and that we have to just hit this for what it is, that this is the core of the evil policy of this empire.
I wouldn't agree with that. I wouldn't agree with that at all. First of all, you're not dealing with an issue policy. The issues are irrelevant. You're dealing with an existential issue. You're dealing with the fact that the British Empire is about to disintegrate in the same way that the original Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Crusader system disintegrated. So they're not particular issues. There are not political campaign issues involved in this at all. Any campaign issues that have come up are byproducts of the essential issue. And if we want to win, we've got to go with the essential issue. And the essential issue is simply that the British Empire, which has otherwise not sufficient power to control the planet, has intimidated and destroyed the sovereignty of the nations of Western and Central Europe, has virtually rotted out the United States, and is fear that they are going to go down, not because of us, not because of any issue. There is no issue for the British Empire, except the British Empire. And therefore what they have to do is they have to stupefy, render stupid and silly people over so-called issues. The issues, except for, there's only one issue, really, of all the issues. That issue is environmentalism. Environmentalism means, this is the British policy. What's the policy? To reduce the human species from 7 billion people to less than 1. That is the British motive. Environmentalism is nothing but people who are very stupid and very corrupt, who allow themselves to be corrupted and made stupid. And if we don't knock that stupidity out, we won't have a political chance of saving the United States. But the issue is not issues. It's not campaign issues as such. It's raising the level of mentality of the population from issues to the issue. And the issue is the British Empire, which is a world empire. And the world empire has always been environmentalist. It's a hallmark of the British Empire. The way we will win is not by fighting environmentalism, but by discrediting utterly. It's a separate question. In other words, in order to win, we have to deal with this greening problem. But it's not, we're not going to go out there and campaign against the greenies. We're going to go out there and campaign against the British Empire, and its stooges. And don't get involved in these side issues. The environmentalist issue is a side issue. It is not a compounding issue. It's a side issue. The issue is getting what? Putting in the substitute for this crap. And that substitute is Glass-Steagall plus, again, the same thing, the national credit system. Those two issues are the issues we fight for against the British Empire and against the traitors to the United States who are supporting the British Empire in this operation. Mm-hmm. And we have a British stooge who's now the current president. That's the issue. Don't try to butter it up by building up by composite issues. Go at the issue. The issue is, are we going to have a United States or not? Are we going to be ruled by the British Empire or not?
Right.
In other words, don't go with this idea.
Right.
That's what I was afraid of. Don't go with issues. Go with the issue. Mm-hmm. The way that the American people are stupefied and manipulated in elections is always on the issues. They are divided by the issues. And being divided by the issues, the difference in issues, they are made malleable for compromise. The compromise results in the loss of everything that they're fighting for or should be fighting for. They tell, well, don't you like this? Well, don't you like lemonade? Don't you like strawberry? Don't you like this? Huh? And that's how they fool all the foolish American people, voters, into this kind of stuff. The key thing to our accomplishing anything is not falling into that trap. Is go with the simple thing. We got one thing. This nation is going to hell unless, and it's going to hell under the British Empire unless the British Empire is our enemy, buddy. We're going to have a Glass-Steagall Act, Benjamin Franklin Roosevelt style, and we're going to have a system, economic system, which is based against monetarism. Is based, and that's the whole point. Stick to that. Stick to that, from the top down, not the bottom up. Don't kiss somebody's bottom.
Right, and that's the exact thing that these Democrats and Republicans who've capitulated refuse to take on, is this British Empire. And you look at the fact that the Democrats have made a deal to follow Obama off a cliff while we were at the threat of thermonuclear World War III. They know, I mean, look at what happened when you had these Democratic Party pollsters coming out, Schoen and company, calling for, in the election process, a write-in candidacy of Hillary, or you have all of these opposition coming out to Obama's impeachment. And now, all of a sudden, the Democratic Party, out of fear of what's going to happen and what type of Republican Party candidate they're going to get, and being afraid of that, have decided to put the lives of the American people at jeopardy, at the risk of thermonuclear war. One, not because they refuse to oppose Obama, but as you said, which is clear, it's because they fear opposing this British Empire, and that is the ultimate, the ultimate discussion here is, do enough people have the guts to go against this empire, and to realize that the time period that we're on right now is that the British Empire system is ready to explode, and their only option is to go for thermonuclear World War III, and they have their hand grenade in the White House who's ready to push the button on that. And while that's going on, people are looking for their own popular interests. The Democratic Party, from the top leadership on down, the Republican Party putting forth the circus show. And I think what we've expressed, even going out, I can tell you yesterday, I went to a debunking global warming discussion by one of the top scientists who's calling going against the whole global warming fiasco. But one thing that these guys are doing is that they're making this a debate, a conflict of culture, a conflict of interest, versus really getting at what we're saying here, that this is an imperial interest that is to kill billions of people, and you can't compromise with it or try to debate it in any way, because there's no debate. The reality is that if we don't stop this thing, many people are going to die, many people are going to starve, and that people who have the guts and are acting in the interest of, of humanity are going to say that. And I can tell you, a lot of people know that this is something that people don't have the guts to say, and they only see that as a representation coming from what you're doing and what our candidacies here represent.
We've got it all in our hands. We just don't get off focus if we just stick to this question of the monetary process. Because the core of this whole history of humanity, the whole terrible history of European, for example, humanity, has been just that. It's based on this idea of monetarism. And monetarism is a concept which is the basis of empire. And those issues are the issues. When you go to that issue, you're no longer talking about fringe issues. You're now going to the heart of the issue. And that's what we must do. Because what are the most important thing, and that's what I suggest we do as the only platform, is that.
You get these insane things. Like when I went to this Obama delegates meeting and got up and said that the Democrats should do to Obama what the Republicans did to Nixon, and we should force him to resign. Yeah. And then one lady in front of me turns around and said, well, I think we would be really lucky if we ended up with Newt Gingrich. I mean, it is really insane. People have gone bonkers, partly because of terror of this lack of leadership in this crisis.
And leadership means essentially a unity of effect. You can't have a multifarious set of issues. You've got to have a single issue. And the single issue that settles all is the issue of U.S. national sovereignty, first of all. That means we have to have a credit system instead of a monetary system. We have to eliminate the monetarist system from the United States. If we do that, and we go to win on that point alone, we will win everything because we went to a common principle rather than an aggregation of issues. The tendency in U.S. politics, and you'll get a lot of people will encourage you to believe that, is that they have a basket of issues. And a basket of issues is going to draw people together. It does not. It works the other way. It becomes exactly the way the enemy divides and conquers. On a basket of issues. There should be only one issue. The issue of the sovereignty of the United States. Yeah? Because those who go against that idea will expose themselves as being the enemy, if it's properly handled. Therefore, we want Glass-Steagall through. Now, that's a big fighting issue right now. It's a key issue. It cannot be diminished in importance. Because without that, the United States is dead. That ends the question. The United States is finished. And nobody has anything anymore. Second thing, the Glass-Steagall is not a sufficient action. It is an essential action, but not an efficient one, and not a sufficient one. You have to go now to a credit system only. The credit system and the rest of it, Glass-Steagall, defines the entire issue, because every issue that you want to take on seriously comes to these two issues and their connection. Now, you see, for example, I had this question in from someone from the, I won't mention the bank, but it came up Tuesday. It came up yesterday. And this is typical. There are people in banking, there are people of competence, not ignorant people, people of competence, who can understand these issues. You can't get people to adopt issues they don't understand. You may get them to adopt the name of an issue they don't understand, but they don't understand what the issue is. So the key thing is to get an approach to a patriotic intelligentsia of people who understand what the United States represents historically and what it must represent again today for the defense of civilization against these bastards, the British, and their evil doings. And it's people who respond to that who are durable. And it's the manifestation of a collection of people who are of this durable quality, which then leads to bringing other people in to support the same campaign. In other words, first of all, if you want to win a campaign, you must win a leadership. You must win a section of the population as a leadership, which will function as a leadership. I think we have it. You have it from all kinds of people who understand, on these two issues alone, can understand them and therefore will be a united front on a united issue, and that's the only possible way we could ever achieve a victory in the election now. Stick to two issues. Otherwise, you can explain implications of those issues, but don't make them independent issues. Just discuss all the things that go together with the question of the sovereignty of the United States, the Glass-Steagall principle of sovereignty, and this credit system principle of sovereignty. And you can discuss everything under those umbrellas. But don't put them as also-rans. Put them underneath the commitment to the real issue. The real issue is get the United States back. And you won't get it back without Glass-Steagall. You won't get to first base. Glass-Steagall is first base. Credit system is a home run.
That's definitely what it takes, is a commitment to principle, because it's clear that everywhere we go, there's the local election campaigns, and no one has anything of relevance to say. All of their issues will not address the solution, or address the crisis, and never will. So it's clear that all of that is a distraction from reality, and the only thing that needs to be said is this principle.
Yeah.
What we found too, Rachel, on that point, is that a lot of the American people, they have been responding to the concept of a credit system. And this is something that we've just found overall. What I've seen personally is that you have Democrats, you have Republicans who vote Democrat, you have Democrats who don't want to be associated with the Democratic Party maybe anymore. They're going with the independent approach. But you've got people who are generally unhappy with what's happening. Whenever you tell them, we're going to seize back our sovereignty, we're going to take the nation back through a very clear process of overthrowing an empire, they may not get the British question. But what they do get is they get the question of globalization, is environmentalism, is genocide. That's something people do get that. And so what it seems like we have to do here is we have to look in the face the evil policy that's being promoted, and then give people a very clear alternative, which is us seizing our sovereignty back. And there's more than enough evidence of the genocidal policy of the British. It's been going on in Africa for hundreds of years. It's been going on in Asia for hundreds of years. It's a policy that's been ongoing. People get that sense. But then the question of what does it mean to seize back the sovereignty of the nation, that's something that people are ready to move with, but we've got to be uniquely prepared to present it to them in a very clear way, seizing it back.
Well, we got two issues with four. Two issues or one issue. With four. That's the issue for the campaign. Now we have some anti-issues. Things that ought not to be allowed. You divide it that way and you've got it. Now, don't underestimate the potentiality of winning over a core of reliable leadership from among people who are not exactly partisan, but who will respond as some of the people we've had discussions with will respond on the basis of science, of knowledge, that this isn't going to work, that this is what we need. Of course that's right, they'll say. And if it's people who go that from when the totality of their personality is absorbed in a concept of what the nation's interests are, there you've got reliability. Now, let's take another side of the thing. It's the fun side. Take the negatives. Now, you could talk to Sky about this, because you know what he did a couple of weeks ago, what he's been doing. We proved that the greenies are the lost cause. They are the dinosaurs of history. That the greenies died out. It wasn't a die out of the animals. It was a die out of the greenies, the dinosaurs. Whereas the other little birds and bees and so forth did just fine. They grew up and had the greatest success and expansion of their system that ever happened. And the old lumbering, stupid dinosaurs went dead, along with everything like them. Now, with the greenies are the United States and Britain are the dinosaurs of this, this era of the solar system. And that's the way to treat it. Because if you make the point, if you show people, this dinosaur question is crucial. If you show people that green is the dinosaurs, call it the Dinosaurs Club. The Democratic Party is becoming a dinosaurs club. The Republicans are already a scaly dinosaur club. And by dividing things in that way, what you want to do is you want to encompass the mind of our citizens, the mind of the citizen, who senses, and it's like patriotism. Patriotism is not, I love my country or do this and so. Patriotism is you have a conception of what the nation is, its content, its principles, what it's working for, what its interests are. You see that as a single thing. We must be like this. This is the way Lincoln organized in the Civil War, the exact same principle. It's the unity of the individual personality. And the way we were screwed up, people became divided. Why? On issues, by playing on issues. Once you understood that this thing that was called the Confederacy was an enemy operation to brainwash people into stupid things and to perpetuate evil, then people didn't have a difficulty in understanding what that war was about. And it's the same thing today. It was the way the American Revolution worked, the same place. A unity of a conception of how we must be self-governed. And the idea is you want the envelopment of the self, of the sense of the self, of the citizen. Yes, I am this, I'm a citizen of this country. I stand for these principles as my country does, or was founded to be. And why want my country back? We want these clowns out. We want our country back. What's going on now doesn't work, never will work. Don't be stupid. Don't vote for these jerks. Let's take our country back. That sort of theme. So you've got on that basis, that conceptual basis, you have the positive side, what we must do. Well, there shouldn't be any difficulty in people who are rational to understand that. So therefore, you've got to find rational people and get rational people together and get involved in the discussion. Don't be worried about pre-winning the discussion. If you've got the right program, you've got the right ideas, just go for it. And people will come around if you just play it right. What you want is a unity of American people say, oh, I am an American. And I'm going to vote American. And your real point is each candidate vote American.
Yeah. You know, Lynn, I think a useful reference point for bipartisan or really nonpartisan, you look at the Eisenhower administration and then Kennedy. Eisenhower was trying to do what he was trying to do to bring back, in a sense, the tradition of Roosevelt that Truman had begun to stuff under as mandated by Wall Street. And then, of course, what he laid out in his outgoing address on the way that this empire does work, this divide and conquer, the so-called, what he referred to around the military-industrial complex. But then what you see with Kennedy and actually bringing this back and bringing back the science, with the Apollo program and so on. But, it goes back to what you were saying with the September 30th webcast that you had given, where you gave that beautiful explanation of this, what a credit system was, that it's not simply a monetary, it's just not about banking or something, but it's actually about that human economy is a process of development, going into what Sky, or looking back on that, your conception of credit now from the standpoint of what Sky and these guys are doing in the basement, is you see this process of development. You see that this has to be, for mankind to exist, we have to fulfill this mandate of the universe of progress. And so I think putting that in that context, that this is what a credit system does. It's to prepare the future, and to do this through scientific advancement, through raising the energy flux density, through increasing the technology and so on. And that, I think if we can get that across to the American people, that as a core, as the core principle of the universe, then that's how we're going to recruit people to just not to see beyond this partisan, to see that this is what the leaders of our nation that have done the best represent that as scientific policy, as statecraft.
Another thing to deal with in that context, it's not a smart thing to go out and tell citizens generally that they're stupid. It is not a good election campaign slogan. However, the fact is they are acting pretty stupidly. But you have to deal with the issue without rubbing sandpaper across their rear end or something. And the way you do that is you say, well, you know how to say that? Did you know about this? 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 Now, that's often been done by smart campaigners in dealing with a constituency. Mm-hmm. Hey, did you know about this? Did you know about this? Did you know about this? Huh? And so, therefore, you can say indirectly, effectively, or more effectively than you can sometimes say things directly. When you get dealing with a problem of people are blustering and saying silly things, they don't even know what they're talking about, but they're insisting upon them as issues of their point of view and so forth. Well, don't push them into it, defending it. Well, do you know about this? Do you know about this? Did you hear about this? Did you know that happened? And that's the way that we often have succeeded in our organizing.
Right.
Is when our people go out into the streets and they try to raise support, and they just go with either sheepish submission to foolishness being thrown at them, or just insult the guy.
Right.
neither of these things is known to work very well. I don't think there's any mystery as why that's the case.
The chances are they didn't believe it anyway, but they feel obligated to defend it.
The point is our ability. We have to have a sort of a Catholic capacity as a citizen. We have to be the representatives of what the country represents. Mm-hmm. We have to speak to that issue. We have to talk about unity, not about these great divisive issues.
Right.
The issue may be debatable, discussable, but the first thing, does the guy you're talking to know anything about it? How can you argue with him if he doesn't know what he's talking about? Mm-hmm. So you've got to prod out of him a sense of discovery. So you have to assume that he's got some intelligence up there someplace, and what you're doing, you're going to try to coax it out of him and get him to recognize that he's not a stupid person, that he does either know something or knows he should know it, and that now you're on your way to getting somewhere.
Well, it's very clear that where you get a lot of the stupidity around the issues is where there's a lack of a fight for exactly what we're fighting for, until the idea of the sovereign nation state and what a credit system really is in terms of what NWAPA, and the potential for just expansive development throughout the future. In the absence of that, that's where you get the defense of the budget cutting. That's where you get all these different reflections of systemic evil. But it just right now, I think we're coming to we're at the point of such a unconscionable evil with this the verge of nuclear World War III, that it just I think a lot of people just don't want to think about it, but it's always been there. The question of the systemic evil has really always been there in different forms of genocide, whether it be the carbon capping, the spread of malaria in Africa, you name it. But it's just an unavoidable question, I think, at this point.
Yeah, it is precisely. But the point is, we have to actually assemble an intelligentsia of people who understand the American people and understand their problems, understand their ignorance, understand what they've been subjected to, and, in a sense, educate them by drawing them into the discussion, not throwing slogans at them, but drawing them into the discussion of what these real issues are. And getting them, you want to get them to think. You don't want to get them to close up like a clam or something, you know? Because you irritated them, and the clam closes its shell,
Right.
and doesn't know that it's being bored into by a mollusk. It's going to get inside there and eat him. He just hides there and ready to be eaten, fresh, alive. But the point is we have to draw people out into a desire for a learning process, to enjoy a learning process, to come away from a conversation thinking they knew more as a result of the conversation than they did before. And if you can help people by empowering them to understand, and if it's valid and provable that what you've said is true, it's your best shot. Because we've got a lot of ignorant people out there. They don't know anything about these things. They haven't been told. They haven't been educated. So you have to actually look at these guys lovingly, as you're coming there to help them. Because you are disgusted by the fact that they're not living full lives. They're not enjoying full lives. And you think about, do I want to talk this person back into the house and we have a discussion? Is that a what? Or do I think I want to discuss science with this person or from him? Well, our job is to educate. And our job is to educate by knowing how to educate. Not because some teachers will try to educate by slamming down with authority. And they do have to maintain some authority these days with what's going on in the schoolrooms. But nonetheless, that's not the way you want to educate. The way you educate is you draw the student into curiosity about the subject matter. And they want to know more about it. They want to be told stories that make their lives richer for them.
Right.
And from these things, they begin to grow up. And you get people from all kinds of backgrounds who've got that kind of educational process, could become giants in respect to their own generations. And that's what we want. If you can spread that kind of thing, that we're creating people's power to recognize what their own potential is, and give some demonstrations to them that how this works, that you can actually show them, that you can make them a stronger, better person than they are already, they're going to appreciate that. They're going to trust you, and justly so.
And they're going to want to turn around and bring other people into the process.
Exactly. It's exactly it. Actually, the idea of an educational approach rather than a propaganda approach. You want a minimum of propaganda. You want mostly educational approach. That this is possible. I mean, for example, we're producing things on Nawapa. Now, this Nawapa story, as we're going through producing more and more of it, it's both an educational picture, but it's showing people things about their area of the society which they didn't dream were possible. Right. And that kind of thing. Can I get in on this? And you won them. They said, well, that's crazy. Why don't we do this already? I mean, we could do that back then? We got 4 million jobs that these guys could represent here for people in the United States, and nobody told us about this? What's going on here?
Right.
That's the whole way. You have to really express love toward the people. And the way to express love is the obvious way, is make them feel better about themselves. And make them know that they're right in coming to that conclusion. But you've got to engage them.
Like the people who say, don't spend money that you don't have. And then you often say, well, let me tell you what Alexander Hamilton did, because they didn't have any money. And then, I mean, this has happened a number of times. The people come up and you think it's an Austrian school lunatic, but it's not. It's just the person repeating, don't spend money you don't have. And you say, well, let me tell you what Hamilton did. We had a massive amount of debt. He said we did have to pay it, but here's how. And they said, oh, I'm for that. And you say, oh, didn't you just say you don't want to disorganize, but it is very striking because they say, no, I'm for that. I think we should do that. We should have a credit system, which is not what they were saying when they came up.
That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
So the point is you have to engage the population, and you have to engage them by getting them to ask questions.
Questions like, look, when did we lose our sovereignty? How are we going to get our sovereignty back? You get people asking that question.
Well, I think what's happened is the hack You know, organized crime has played a very important part in elections in the United States.
That's for sure.
Okay. And so, therefore, it's who you know in that way that sometimes determines how you vote. But we now come to the point that that system doesn't work. First of all, there's not much left to steal, which does complicate the situation simply. But no, the thing, what I see, and I see in our own organizing, is that I see people who know how to evoke something from people, and those who are battering at the walls, and the battering at the walls does not work. You actually have to feel that you love these Americans because you are an American, and you want your people to benefit. And you want, first of all, you want them to have the internal benefits, which we normally call education or similar kinds of things, and a few open doors and a few open gates for them. And that's the beginning days of trust of the American citizen in the nation. That's possible. They feel that they're part of this process. They're in the process. If they don't know something, there's somebody and it's available. Somebody will give it to them. That sort of thing. No, it's the sense of you really have to love the citizen categorically, because you are if you're a leader, you're responsible for them. If you're running to office, the office which affects them, you are accountable for what you do to them.
Right.
And what you don't tell them, you're accountable for that too. And so that's why it's a very simple programmatic approach. What it seems simple from one top, when its implementation, it opens up a whole rich area of development. And we want people to think, as they get more and more irritated and disgusted, that they can come to us, that we're organizing for our real presidency, and get this one out.
Right. And they can get a sense that they can come to us for a true mission. And, you know, because people out there, like I said, they've been dumbed down in their education, and there's a bit of ignorance, but there's also a bit of desperation. And you look at more people on the streets that are starving, out of work, unemployed, so forth, and they're seeing the effects of these political leaders who have sold them down the creek without a pedal. And so they're looking and saying, okay, are you going to give me something that is not a show, and that's not what these other candidates are doing in terms of compromising and putting my life at risk? And that's what people see on the streets when we're talking to them every day. You know, they're saying, you don't realize that I just came from the food pantry, and I'm going there every day, and I don't really care about these politics that you're talking about, because it all seems like BS to me. But when you give them a sense, as you're saying here, that the choice that they make in terms of what's going to affect their life is understanding the proposal, or should I say the solution that we're putting on the table, is the only thing that's going to work in their interest at this time. But I think the most important thing is giving people a higher sense of who they are as human beings, a higher sense of conception, and getting at what, for instance, the representation of the idea of a manned space program represents, and as something that goes against all of, you know, the issues politically that people are talking about, as the unifying effect of how we're going to bring nations together. I mean, it's something that everybody can take part in, that everybody can remember from President Kennedy as what actually pulled the nation together in a unified effect that everyone was proud of, was proud to be an American citizen, was proud to be a human being for. And so if we're talking about unifying the population, then one of the things that is going to do that is higher conception of what it means for mankind to take its rightful place in space. Then you break all the boundaries of the borders, all of the war policies, all of the starvation policies start to subsist. They start to go away because now you have a common mission for mankind that's actually going to take up these very questions. And people people get excited about that, not just because it's something that you're presenting to them that's outside of them, but something that is what represents or uniquely represents their human character that they can participate in.
Well, that's the point. We've got to be an organization, a core organization with this role, this identity, and this mission orientation. We have to do it. And we don't have much time. But I think we can do it. And my age is worthwhile doing.
It's worthwhile doing at our age, too.
I know that. I thought you'd pick up on that. No, the point is, you've really got to have a sense of loving the people you're trying to lead. You really have to. You have to care for them in ways that count, not in silly ways, but in ways that count, like simply making them feel better about themselves, because you're inviting them to participate in something they didn't know about the day before. And they're glad for that, and they will come back and ask for more, ask for the next time. They got, when you recruit people, they have problems. And therefore, you begin to become acquainted with their problems. First, you become acquainted with them, and then you become acquainted with their problems. And how the manner in which you respond to that situation is crucial. Because if you cannot get a sense of unity between you and the people you're representing, it doesn't work. And then the other gamblers and so forth come in and they play their games. And I've often been concerned about the fact that I think many of our people often did not really get that point strongly enough. This was particularly when I was away for a while, and things got pretty bad. But if we exemplify this in our organization and in what we're doing outwardly, it will catch on fast. I don't know how fast, but it'll catch on. And just do it. And that's the way it'll work. But we got to get to the point, as I say now, we've got to think in the sense of these issues that we're raising now, both from on the scientific issues and the other issues, have now reached a point at which we are ready to start moving out. We're getting an organization pulled together, a core organization pulled together. Now we've got to start moving out, spreading out. And I think in the coming couple of weeks, we should be spreading out.
Good.
We've got to get some cash in also, because we've got to get some more candidates in.
Good.
Yes. Good.
Okay. Anything to add from there?
Well, I'll just make one final point. Just that this is, we wouldn't sit and yell at a 2-year-old who didn't know how to do something. And I think a lot of the people in the population are, in some ways coming up with that they just don't know what to do. And I think challenging them, and like you would do with a child, is you get them to use their mind and get them to make a discovery. And that's how people are going to grow up.
Yep. They will.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, that's a good concluding point. So we'll gather again next week for this discussion, and we'll have a lot more between now and then.
Have fun.
Thank you.